Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. Now, the Midsummer St. John's Eve celebrations at the end of June signalled the traditional start of the sea trout run in Ireland. And if you've read Kingsmill Moors and Man-Made Fish, you'll get some idea of just how magical and plentiful the sea trout fishing in Connemara once was. So, for this latest episode, we wanted to find out more about that time, what made it so special, and just why it all collapsed so dramatically in the late 1980s. And we spoke to Joe Creane, a lifelong Connemara fly fisherman, who is now a guide on Lough Inagh. And Tom, before we hear from Joe, it was incredible just to hear him harken back to the sea trout runs in Connemara from those days.
Yeah, Darragh, wow. Like, it's absolutely awesome to hear him talking of some of the catches that he went through and, what was available, not so long ago. I mean, the quality of the fishing, it's mind-boggling to hear, what he's talking about. And like, as you said there, when we mentioned Kingsmill Moor, and he more or less, as we'll hear later on, he says, I lived that, I mean, it's phenomenal. Like, I only got to see a bit of a tail end of it, because I did fish Inagh, funnily enough, before the collapse at the end of the 80s. But I wasn't really big into fly fishing. I was still young enough, and I was dapping. But I did get to see somehow what it was like. But God, what was available, and we touched on what's gone. It's gone now. It's
like what was once so abundant. And I can only imagine, like, because again, you'll hear it from Joe, but like just that sense of, I suppose, fishing the lake or the river or wherever, and I suppose just seeing the fish and just the runs of fish and the numbers of fish and the size of the fish as well. Like.
Yeah, like, because definitely, I mean, like, Connemara traditionally never had big sea trout, and particularly now, what we're getting now, a lot of the sea trout, when you hear of sea trout being caught now, everything is counted like fish of 11, 12 inches. And I suppose a lot of the time they were counted back then too, but like, you hear him talk of certain systems and the average size of the fish. Very interesting that he said that, because they used to run to the upper lakes, because if you from Kingsmill Moore's book, where he talks about the Costello system, how the bigger fish ran earlier and ran straight up the Shanawana, which is the top lake of the system, which I've been fortunate enough to have fished it once. But he says that with the Gowla system as well. And some of the places that he talks about where they got those phenomenal sizes of average sizes, there were lakes in the upper lakes in the particular system, very similar to the Shanawana in Costello.
I'm fascinated as well, just the amount of water there, the amount of them just driving through, the countryside. And I'm trying to imagine, kind of 30, 40, whatever, 50 years ago, that it would have been just full of sea trout back then. Like, and now, are they kind of, like, as far as we know, are they pretty much devoid now of fish, or is it just tiny numbers of it? Like,
some systems still have a good run of sea trout. Inagh been one of them. And that's where we're talking to Joe. Initially, when we're talking to Joe, he does mention having a good day already on this year on Inagh. Costello still has some, and Kylemore still has some, but some of the systems are devoid. I mean, he talks of Gowla there, the Gowla system, and that's just crashed. It's just bombed. That's so sad. A couple of the other systems, the Denver systems, the numbers are just so small that it doesn't even bear going trying them. And people do try them, and every year, a couple of years, people will go back and try, but they just don't show up. But there are a couple of systems, as I said, Inagh been one, which is the Ballyhinch system, Costello, and a couple others, yeah.
And tell me this, actually, do you get many anglers that now like come to Connemara for sea trout fishing in the summer, or is it mainly, like, my experience of kind of, if I fished any of these systems like Ballyhinch or any of these, is that you happen to catch a sea trout just by accident? You're not targeting them, like,
Yeah, it's more accidental, well, or incidental, whatever you want to say. But the numbers of anglers that will come solely to fish for sea trout in Connemara, very low, very low. Which is, and Joe touches on it as well, when you compare to what was there beforehand, and the commercial value of sea trout fishermen to the area. I mean, that's all gone now. That's all gone now. But you get a lot of the fisheries would have salmon in them that have sea trout, and guys would fish primarily now for salmon. I mean, like we've discussed before, we've had David on the show, David McAvoy, the Delphi system. The interesting thing is Delphi was traditionally always a sea trout fishery, more so than a salmon fishery. But it's just with the advent and the installation of the hatchery system there and the work that they did, they actually made it into a salmon, the salmon fishery that it is. But you look back, and Kingsmill Moore does write about it. You buy the next edition of Kingsmill Moore book. There's an extra chapter. There's a chapter on Delphi, and he's going there to fish for sea trout.
How it's changed like since then, and we'll hear from Joe now, and like Joe also, you can hear the kind of anger and consternation about what allowed it to happen and the kind of consequences of it all. So it's a really fascinating kind of bit of a delve into the past, and I think it's kind of shines a light on it as well, which I think is very important.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of understandable when you hear of the fishing that he did have. It's kind of understandable that you'd be kind of vexed, to say the least, over it being let go, as he more or less insinuates, rather than actually going, but been let go. That maybe if things were done differently, we'd still have the sea trout fishing that we once did.
Yeah. Well, look, let's hear from Joe now, and first ask them about the fishing on Lough Inagh so far this year.
It's brilliant, actually. It's amazing to say that, after the year we had last year. And if I was to be honest, last year it was an absolute disastrous year on Inagh. We had only 22 salmon last year on Inagh, and at the minute we've about 25 salmon as we stand right now.
Right, so you've got more already this year than the whole of last year.
We had for the whole season last year.
Wow, that's great.
I was actually on it yesterday in the sun. I said, okay, the sun, I went up. I had something in mind that I wanted to try out. And I went up and I tried it. And I did. I was in a salmon for 3 seconds, and he was gone, he was going to go back anyway. But, that was it. The day before, I was with John Dardis, who would be well known in political circles, and John hooked an absolutely brilliant big fish up at the reeds at the top of the lake. The fish took off, but for some strange reason, the Father Ronan stayed with the fish. So the priest, the clergy weren't with us on the day.
They weren't with you on the day. So just a thing there that we get, Joe, for maybe people who don't know. Lough Inagh, just give us a rundown on the fishery. I know, like, it's between the Mam Turk and the 12-Pin Mountains in Connemara. Just give us a rundown on the fishery itself, Joe.
Well, it's the Ballynahinch is the main tributary of it's the main run. I mean, everything that comes into Inagh comes in through Ballynahinch. Comes up through Ballynahinch, comes up through we'll say the river, up through the Ballynahinch Lake. Then it comes up through the canal, up into Derry Clare, up into the Butts, and straight up into Inagh. And the tributary then there's another little tributary that takes Glendalough. The salmon run, they run up, as I say, from Ballynahinch. They hit two tributaries. They hit the Inagh, and they hit Glendalough. And the choices as to where the most salmon go, it's debatable, but Inagh this year, for some reason, they have been, we've had a very interesting year this year so far, in the sense that, nestled in between those mountains and the people you guide with. And I often wonder at times, are these people here for fishing, or are they here for, I mean, they're enchanted by the absolutely surrounding that they're in,
So what's your role at Inagh, and how did you get involved at Inagh?
Well, I got involved in Inagh. I was in the building game all my life, and I had a bit of, I had a cancer scare, which thanks be to God, I always say, I'm leaving it in the hands of the gods to say to steer me through. And every day I fish, I think that scare becomes that little bit lesser. But I said to Colin Folden, who was the manager there at the time, Colin, I said, if you ever need somebody to, if you need a man, a guide or a gilly, I said, I'm available. And that's kind of where it started. But going back to the older days, I fished that fishery with my father, God rest him, Paddy Creane, and it back in 40 years ago. It was an absolutely amazing fishery, and our average fish on that particular day would be possibly, you might have well down 16 sea trout and a salmon. And my father, I'd say if ever we had rows as father and sons was on that lake. I remember one day coming up and this salmon, for some strange reason, the bloody salmon were coming to him on the day, and this salmon came and I said, Jesus, Dad, I said to him, what in the name of God are you at? I said, well, you're not in Lough Inagh now, and you're not fishing sea trout. That's a salmon. Do you not know the difference between the? And sure, of course, he was a man he wasn't like me. He was a man of few words, but anyway, Jesus' second salmon came to him, and the rear up again, too quick, too what you be called it. But a third salmon came to him, and I said, "That's it. No, I'm out of here. I'm out of here, up to the top after sea trout." So that was just the sort of place it was. It was one of those magic piece of waters that has possibly lost a bit of its magic at the minute, but maybe that magic might come back.
Yeah, it really was fantastic. I mean, it still is a good water, Joe. There's no doubt about it. But like, I was lucky enough, it's gas to hear you talking about fishing with Paddy there. And yeah, I remember your dad well. He was a lovely man. But I was lucky enough to fish Inagh as well with my dad. And it was fantastic. Just got the tail end of it when it was really good. But unlike you, I didn't get to fish a lot of the other waters. And I know, chatted to you before about it. I mean, some of the other sea trout lakes, you got to fish them in their prime, Joe. You were very fortunate that you did. I mean, places like, I don't know, Lough Inagh, other places.
Oh my God. Well, I'll tell you, I think, I honestly would say to you right now that if anybody was genuine and asked about what was the sea trout lakes of Connemara like, and I'm taking a small contour of mountain and lakes into, I mean, basically you start with Ballynahinch, you just go down to Gowla, the inverse system, but the Gowla Lake was possibly one of the greatest lakes that I have ever that I ever had the pleasure to fish. And I look at it down, and I look at them now, and I swear to God, it's with a tear in my eye. I said, my God, that was such a privileged place of such a privileged piece of water to fish, and when the fish ran in the early season, when the fish, we never went into Declan Ridge. Declan Ridge was my fishing partner at the time. Declan was basically a floating line man. I was a kind of a maverick in the sense that floating line, sinking line. But a small, sure, we didn't know lines, we didn't know what the hell we were fishing half the time. If it was a sinking line, sure, it could have been a bloody high D, or it could have been, but it wasn't a high D. But we went out on one season, I think it was 1985, and with a green olive on the cast, a blue Zulu, and probably a Connemara black. That were our three flies early in the year. On that particular night, it's on record, we had 4 fish. We had a 5.5. This was now in 85. We had a 5.5, a 5. These were fish that were unfortunately, we killed our fish that time. We had a 5.5, a 5.3, a 5.2, and a 4.16. and a 3-pounder. And that was the green olive. People didn't, Days of Cork, green olive, that color green, that was the color. That was the color, but that was then. It was absolutely, it was an amazing fishery. Like, it was an amazing fishery.
What happened to it?
Fish farms. 1986. I only looked a few records up today. Declan and myself were up on Cushmeg. Cushmeg was off the Inver system, a system that came up through Carril, Shonnakelch, up into Cushmeg. Imlock East was the lake that was further up. But Cushmeg was one of these sacred piece of waters. And we had 19 sea trouts and we had 6 browns. The 6 browns that all weighed, the 6 browns weighed 8 pounds. And we had 19 sea trout weighing 38 pounds. That was September 1986. The fish farms came in. It was like as if the graph went from hero to zero. We lost as compassionate. You know, I'm even teary even talking about it right now. I mean, you had on the bottom of that system, you had Lough Inagh. Lough Inagh was an amazing piece of water. You had Little Lough Inagh. You had on that system. You had the river that went up into Carril. Carril was just that magic piece of again a magic piece of water. I mean, when I think back on the whole thing now, and people ask me, Joe, what was sea trout like in Connemara? And I said to them, ye will never know. Ye will never know. Declan and myself we were like the Tom Cranes and the Arctic. We it didn't matter. We were out there every single day. Sean Nixon, we would book I think Sean Nixon charged us €7. We fished every single day while once the sea trout ran. It cost us €7, £7 or whatever it was a day. And Sean would say, some days he'd say, you know, Sean, we're fishing Carril. Can we book Carril for Sunday? And you might get an abrupt, no, you're not. No, I have a party of people coming in here on Cushmeg. I want you to go up and fish Cushmeg. I'm not going to charge you. And I want to report back. And what should we come back with a report? For Jesus, it was laden with fish, it was, you know, and that's fine.
You were the scout for the fish, were you?
Oh, we were scout. We were the scout. Now, he used us and we used him. You know what I'm saying?
Perfect relationship.
Yeah. but you know, the famous story was on Carril. People might talk about the biggest sea trout I've ever hooked. Now, my biggest sea trout was 6.5 pounds, but I hooked one fella one day. My wife was heavily pregnant at the time, and she said, Joe, we're the Pope is in Galway. And I said, oh geez, I fishing booked. We're fishing. Declan and myself are fishing. Okay, Betty went in to see the Pope. I went to Carril. That was my sacred. That was my sacred grounds. You know. Okay, people want to see the Pope, but Carril was my Pope. I hooked this fish up over the top on a bloody fly called the blue Peter. A blue Peter was a very good fly on Carril at the time, and 10 minutes no move. 15 minutes, couldn't get a stir out of him, and I lost the fish. I came home that night devastated, and I said to Betty, I said to my wife, I said, oh Jesus, Betty, I said, I'm devastated, and why? I lost it. Well, the devil ninja, she said, you should have been in to see the Pope today.
That's why you lost him. That's why you lost him. Tell me, I suppose, Joe, a lot of people maybe, you talk about in terms of kind of the heyday of sea trout, and my only kind of inkling of it, I suppose, and I was talking to Tom before about this, was you read Kingsmill Moors, A Man May Fish.
Yeah.
And that's maybe gives you some kind of inkling of...
His book is very real. It did, that it didn't... I read Kingsmill Moore book and I get inside his character and I get inside Jamesy, the boatman, but it didn't change. We had that. We had that. We lived the same scenario. We lived the same dream.
It was nothing unusual. Like.
No, not at all. It was now we had days that we went out. We had days we went out. We struggled. We struggled days. But I mean, oh man alive, it was this, I'm privileged. My son Ronan, who's a guide, a professional guide in New Zealand, and Ronan talks about sea trout. And I said, Ronan in Ballynahinch, Ronan, I said, don't even think about it. I said, you haven't seen sea trout. You haven't even seen what it was actually. Even you haven't seen 5% of what it was like. And he didn't, which was unfortunate, but he lives my dream. He knows what I'm talking about, and he talks about it,
If you were to take it back to the golden age, as you were talking about, which was your favorite one to fish? Which river, which fishery, which system?
Gowla Lake would be, without Gowla Lake number one, Curreel number 2. Absolutely. And at the end, they were the magic, but there was one gem. It came from the Inver system, where the tributary on Lough Inagh went up into Curreel, but there was another tributary. There was another run that went across into Little Lough Inagh, Bunnahask, Bornahask, and it ended up in Rushing. Rushing would have to be an absolute gem. Rushing was the lake that you went to. I mean, if you got 10 fish on Lough Inagh, you would nearly need a bag to carry them home in the evening. It was that sea trout in that particular time had the big boys traveled, and the small boys stayed behind. Now big boys stayed behind with them as well, but the big fish seemed to want to go to the top. It was like if you take Lough Inagh and that system that went across into Little Lough Inagh, Bunnahask, Bornahask, Rushing. Whatever was in their mind was spawning. The big boys went into the distance. You take the other side of Curreel, they went up into Curreel, they went up into Shonnakelch, they went up into Cushmeg, they went up into Imlock East. But the fish on Cushmeg, Shonnakelch, Cushmeg, they were, and Imlock East was the furthest one up again. My God Almighty, they were huge. They were huge. You take Gowla. Gowla had the system. They ran the river. They went into Gowla Lake. There was Redmans above it, the White Lakes. They went up into up into Lough Inagh. Lough Inagh was again the top lake where the monsters went. You take the other system again from Ballynahinch, where they came up into the Attery, where they came up into these brown trout didn't run the Gowla, they run Ballynahinch. They came up, they ran the Ballynahinch system, but they came to Attery. They did not. They came to Attery, and they did this small diversion at Ballinafad, and they went up that river. They went up into into Attery Lakes and the Attery Crossroad Lakes, but there was a little stream that brought them up into Imlock. I am not joking. Again, it was whatever thing was it about sea trout that particular time. These big boys, they ran a stream that was no wider. Than it was no wide. It was 16 inches to 2 foot. And these big sea trout got up. I caught them in it. The biggest I caught in it was over 4 pounds. But Sean Nixon and myself one time went up. He was doing a little bit of research and he said, Joe, typical Sean. He said, you might come with me on Sunday. And we went down and he netted some of these. Oh, Jesus, you want to see the bullocks of sea trout that he took out of the small little stream, but that was the way. That was the way the sea trout. That's where the sea trout went. These were virgin streams way up at the top, and then to think all of a sudden. Now I'm jumping a bit here now. Then to think that at the end of all of that, in 1986, after that, the decline started.
It's a real tragedy, Joe. It's not like it was a real tragedy that it was we were never able to bring it back,
We'd never got a chance to bring it back. The greatest insult to sea trout fishing in the west of Ireland, it died. It died within 2 years. Declan will tell you, and myself, I probably know a history of sea trout in Connemara probably better than anyone because I was interested in it and I dogged them. And they wanted to put a fish farm. They wanted to do a big fish rearing thing up in Derry Clare, which I went in there next, and I was totally a sole survivor. Probably a sole survivor. Didn't give me great opportunism to get fishing in Ballyhinch afterward because I really dogged it. But the biggest insult, sea trout in Connemara would be alive and well today had the fisheries got off their bloody pedestal and done something about it. They did absolutely nothing about it, and I will go on record to say that they did nothing. If you're going to ask me one question, what is the greatest disaster that happened Connemara, would be, I absolutely love sea trout with a passion, with an absolute passion. I was on Inagh the last day with a gentleman. We had, believe it or not, we had 10. We had 10 sea trout. We had 10 sea trout and 1 salmon. Now, to me, the salmon didn't matter, but the 10 sea trout mattered. But why? We lost an incredibly huge industry through, I don't know why they just turned their back on it. I don't know. I just don't know. But it's my greatest, I could cry, it is, give me a punch, give me a give me my sea trout back. But it was magic, it was passionate, it was beautiful fishing. I think it was big, the fact it was the west of Ireland. I swear they were ignorant of, they had to be ignorant of what was there. They had to be ignorant. And certainly it didn't come from college science anyway.
It's very tragic, all right, Joe, and it's a huge loss, Connemara. It really is. It really is. But listen, Joe, before we go up there, there's a thing we always do with everybody we've on, and you'll be no different. So we'll just end it up now. And I know, just get it across for those who don't know, you're not just in sea trout either. I mean, you fish for Ireland a couple of times. You're well known on all the brown trout lakes and everything. So I'm looking forward to the answer to this, because we ask everybody, Joe, what your most memorable fish was. And I add this, it needn't be your biggest fish, but what's your most memorable fish on the fly?
That's a very easy question to answer. And I can describe the day, and I can describe the location, Lough Inagh, one of our mountain lakes, with a steel rod. It could have been an antenna from a bloody, what do we call one of these army yoke
tank,
and a steel rod. It was steel, and it was. I can see the spot on Lough Inagh, and I on a claret and mallard. One of the days of Cork, claret and mallard bought in Mary King's shop in Roundstone, and with Lelion nylon. Lelion was the nylon that we used, and it was a fish of 1.5 pounds, and that was to me That was the magic. That was the day that it all started.
Wow. That I actually know Lough Inagh. I fished Lough Inagh before. That's a cracking fish for Lough Inagh.
But Sconniff is better.
I know that. I know because and you've told me that and you sent me there. But that's a good fish for Lough Inagh. And was that one of your first trout?
That was my first real trout. That was the trout that hooked me. That was the trout that hooked me.
Wow.
That was the hook that was the fish that destroyed me. And that particular time there was a huge colony of cormorants on it. And the cormorants never, they can say what they like about cormorants. And I know, well, as Tommy Thornton in Connemara said, the cormorant is bad, but the crane is worse.
I heard that said before, Joe, and that is on record. It's on record. It was once uttered in O'Malley's pub in Connemara. Yeah?
It is, yeah. Said in it.
Tommy Thornton said it. The cormorant is bad, but the crane is worse.
That's what he said, yeah.
Joe, thanks a million for your time this evening. It's been fascinating hearing, getting some sense of what it was like, in the good old days, and in terms of, how it was allowed to turn into such a tragedy as well, that we can only kind of wonder what if. But speaking to you is just giving us maybe, I suppose, some of that sense of, being able to look back into the past and, remember it,
If I could get an answer as to why the backs were turned on Connemara and on an industry and on a species that should never have been let die, I have no doubt about it. If I got a half dozen fellas with like my passionate, I think with a bit of help, we'd have brought it back.
Well, Joe, thanks again for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Our thanks to Joe Creane for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com, as well as on Instagram. And myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.